Welcome to Shambhu Sessions, a podcast of inspiring conversations with musicians, artists, and visionaries of our time. I'm your host, Shambhu, guitarist and composer. Today I'm joined by Kabir Sehgal, a multi-Grammy and Latin Grammy award-winning producer, a best-selling author, investment banker, U.S. Navy Reserve officer, and one of the most multi-dimensional creative people I know. Kabir is also a musician and producer with a new release titled Stars and Static 2026, Textured Takes on 250 Years of America. We'll explore that today. Kabir's life sits at the intersection of discipline and imagination, service and artistry, and business and culture. I'm excited to explore his work and inspirations. Welcome, Kabir. Lots to talk about today. How are you and where are you?
Thanks for having me, Shambhu. Always a pleasure. I'm in Atlanta, and I'm here reporting for duty.
Wow, incredible. Just to let people know, we met years ago when I played guitar for your event with Deepak Chopra. You later distributed two of my releases, and I thank you for supporting my music. So let's get into it. Many people I interview have one career, music. You've built careers in music, finance, writing, and military service. Tell me about your life and career paths and the deeper thread that connects it all for you.
Sure. Well, I think if I were as talented as you or some other people, I might just make a career in music. But those of us with lesser talents have to get by sort of piecing it together. And I think about my life as a portfolio career. And just as a portfolio of when you think about your investments, stocks, bonds, treasuries, whatever it is, I think about my career as a few buckets. So there's finance. So I worked for many years in investment banking and as an investor. That's the first bucket. The second bucket is writing. I've written several books because I love to write and express myself, and I like to learn. So whatever I'm writing is usually what I'm trying to learn about. And then there's I've been in the military, as you mentioned, as a naval reservist. And then the fourth is music, and music's really the passion of my life. When I discovered jazz music at an early age, I thought, this is fascinating. But in order to make it as a professional jazz bass player or instrumentalist, it's such a high bar of performance and rehearsal. And I didn't love the practice as much as probably I should have. And I realized maybe there's another way to make it in the creative world. And so what I try to do is use these four careers to, in some ways, create cushion for me to create a financial capacity to explore musical ideas. So I'm not dependent on my music career to sort of take care of my needs. It's become more remunerative over the years, but this whole idea of portfolio career is, I think there's a lot of people out there that resonate with this idea that they're creative, but you don't have to be a full-time artist. A lot of most well-known artists we know are not full-time artists. They are able to explore their creativity because they've taken the financial demands that it requires and absorb them elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I've had multiple careers. As you know, I started out as a monk for 30 years, and then I went into public relations for Fortune 100 companies, and then went into music. So I love your approach. I'm really curious about what drives you creatively, spiritually, and personally to develop new projects, because you seem to pick themes that are timely and inspirational.
Well, I think that might be it. Picking things that I can learn from and that resonate with me. So a lot of the projects I do, they're not commercial. They're art, or at least my attempt at making some art. And so I try to explore topics and ideas that I guess are timely, but also timeless. Many years ago, I wrote my first book on jazz music and democracy. And jazz music is really the quintessential American art form. And I always thought that, how do I explore this connection between jazz and democracy? And I wrote a book that explored how the U.S. State Department hired jazz musicians to tour overseas and represent America abroad. And so if you look at a lot of my projects, they are sort of the implementation of a jazzocracy. So I'll do a project at the U.S.-Mexico border wall. I'll do a project with undocumented Americans. I'll do a project that explores spirituality in some ways, because I guess I'm trying to look at how to sort of repair the world in a way through music. Maybe that seems noble, but I grew up, Shambhu, listening to my godfather. His name is Andrew Young, who is a close associate with Dr. Martin Luther King. He would tell me that when they would demonstrate their marches, they would do it at like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock right when the evening news was happening. So that was a kind of a way of creating leverage around their protest, that if you protest in the middle of the night, that's great, but not that many people see it. So similarly, if I write a book or an op-ed on a certain topic, only a certain amount of people will see it. So if you want reach, music is an incredible way to do it, because it's sort of people absorb it differently. The part of the brain that processes music is an emotional center of the brain, so you can kind of get to people's hearts and minds in a more subtle and I would say diplomatic way. So I pick projects that I think are social in nature and will hopefully kind of move the world forward to a more humane world. I guess that's the hope, at least. I'm not always successful on that, but that's the goal, to keep moving in that direction.
Let's go back to your youth. You grew up in Atlanta. Your dad was deeply engaged in business and civic leadership. As a child, through his work, you met luminaries like you say, Andrew Young and others, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Later in life, you worked to elevate their work through books and recordings, several which went on to win Grammy Awards, like your recent Grammy for Meditations, the Reflections of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. How did your parents shape your sense of ambition, responsibility, and what felt possible for you?
Well, in Indian culture, I think parents are venerated. They're also worshipped, right? And so I think of my father and mother as my dearest friends and artistic collaborators in a way. And growing up in Atlanta, my dad introduced me, and through the family, was able to meet incredible people like Uncle Andy and Congressman John Lewis. So the question is, what do you do with these relationships? I think you share them. I think you gather wisdom and pass them on. And from a young age, I've been writing books with some of these people and creating music. And so I grew up in this culture where, in Hindi, is different than English in the sense that Hindi, you're always saying, like in English, you'll say, I'm in the room, right? So that's you doing something in the world. But in Hindi, you'll say, kamra mein hu, mein yahan hu. In the room, I am, right? So it's like your place in the world is different. You're always trying to come into this service mentality. Seva is a big component of my family, is like doing service, being kind to people. You before me, op before me, right? And so I think that language and that cultural way of looking at things, how do you take these incredible humanitarians and create music around them? And so you mentioned His Holiness the Dalai Lama. That's a relationship that goes back many decades, right? So my grandfather worked in hospitality in the state of Punjab. What is that role? That's taking care of people, right? So when the Dalai Lama would come to Punjab and Haryana, my grandfather would help welcome him at the airports. So many years later, His Holiness would come to Emory University, and Emory is one of the few places where I think it's the only place where His Holiness has a Western connection, Western professorship. And so my parents would welcome him. So they would introduce me, they would bring me to some of these gatherings. And that's where I sort of absorbed in a childhood of civil rights and learning about His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I would read his books as a young age, or try to at least. And so it kind of comes full circle that if you're creating music, music is sort of non-threatening, right? You want to create music with people. You're not trying to take advantage of people. You're not trying to make money with people. You're just trying to create art. And so in some ways, when you reach out to some of these important figures, you're trying to elevate, if you can, and help their message reach a new audience. In the case of His Holiness, I'll just say that there are many people that don't know who he is. There's a younger generation who's unfamiliar with his works. So when we made this work, we really wanted to introduce him, if possible, to a younger generation. And that's why we invited some of the great guest artists like Maggie Rogers and Rufus Wainwright to be part of the project, because I think that helps with discoverability. And his message is really important and resonant of compassion and kindness and love. And while that's very basic, it's also beautiful to be exploring these topics through music, and it's a joy to make these projects. So my parents sort of created the moral guardrails or guidelines, if you will, what to do with music. I could go make commercial music, and maybe I should, but my heart is really make these kind of projects that move the needle forward.
And you've won multiple Grammys across categories: children's jazz, Latin jazz, spoken word. How do you kind of decide which projects you're going to produce? Is there a secret sauce to a successful project for you, because you've had so many successes?
Well, I would say I don't think there's any such thing as best music. First of all, I think music is very subjective, and recognition is great, but that's not the reason you make the music. You make it to make the music. That's sort of the point of making the project. I always advise artists. I say, look, um, if recognition comes, great. If recognition comes, that's even better, because recognition, you don't take any of this with you. It's all, we're in an impermanent world, and what better to be reminded of that when you put out a work and it's just sitting there. I made a guitar record a few years ago, solo guitar music, and I did it for myself. And I posted once to social media. I said, I'm doing this for myself. No PR, no press release, no nothing. And if you listen to it, great. If you don't listen to it, that's great too. And so you ask about what project I get involved with. I try to get involved in projects that are sort of social in nature, right? Sort of jazzocracy implemented in a way. And then I also try to work with artists who are at the top of their game, right? And so creatively, I don't, historically, I don't really charge. This is all my time, right? And so the question I've got to ask myself is, do I want to work unpaid for months, for years at a time on a project? It has to hit a high bar for me to do that, right? Because if you're working with an artist who are, let's say, ungrateful, or they're calling you on the weekends, it's like, which is fine, but it's also like, why am I doing this, right? And so the topic has to be, for me, President Jimmy Carter, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. These are all-time projects, and it's like a reward just to work on these projects. And so that's how I think about it. And it's hard because I know a lot of people reach out, but my rubric is also, where do I want to learn? Right. So the last few years, I've been moving more, I guess, away from jazz into meditation, spirituality. Shambhu, you're a great inspiration in this regard, listening to your music. Right. And so how do we look at these topics through meditation? And so people, I guess people see the recognition, and it's like, that's not really what it's about. And I like to think about it as the projects are the ones that are elevated. His Holiness is the one that's elevated. I'm just a small role in helping this happen. I was gratified to see the Tibetan community encouraged and excited about this project. And that's a reward. Or to see undocumented young Americans. I did a project called American Dreamers many years ago with John DeVersa, who made exquisite music. And these young undocumented Americans who were brought to the United States out of no fault of their own, the country is essentially telling them go away. And we created a music project in partnership with them that said, hey, these musicians can play, and they're playing American songs at the top level. So it's gratifying to see that community, recognized. And so that's how I think about it. It's, if you can shine the light on someone else, why not? That's sort of the point of this thing. And I try to think of myself as sort of the least talented person in the room, but hopefully with a vision to bring it all together.
And when you're actually producing an album, what are you listening for in the music beyond technique and performance? What's the essence of it that you're going for?
Yeah, I mean, soul is the word, hard to define, but you kind of hear, when you hear it. And so a lot of what I like about jazz music in particular is it's coming right from the source, right? So improvisation is right from the source of how you feel. It's a blend of virtuosity and your inner verve and your inner vitality. Whereas like more produced music, and maybe that's why I shied away from a Shambhu when I'm doing like a pop track or something, those are more highly produced. And so you're comping together performances, and you can kind of lose some of the essence in the project. So for me, I'm usually looking for, is this as good as it can be, and is it coming directly from the source? I guess meditation music is like that in a way, because you're trying to channel some inner being into the music. Your music, of course, moves me. So does this music move me? Is really the key. And that's why I really trust the first take on a lot of times. Sometimes the first take is the most raw, there's the most blemishes, but it also has the most energy. And ultimately, I think of music as energy, and you're trying to convey that energy to an audience, or you're just trying to convey it and get it out in the world. So that's how I listen to it. Is this moving me? I've been involved in dozens, if not hundreds of projects now. So you kind of start to get an ear of what's moving me and what's working.
And your outreach is really diverse. Years ago, you launched the quarantine concerts and had maybe over 100 people performing during the pandemic live. I was one of them. I was really grateful for that. You've got a weekly newsletter called 7 Point Sunday with all kinds of tips on being effective in your life. And then you also promote the idea of portfolio careers. Why all the outreach?
To share, I mean, 7 Point Sunday, for example, that's my weekly newsletter. I lose money on that because to pay for the newsletter, the service, the market, the advertisement, But ultimately, I think it's like a public utility in a way, because a lot of people, I get so many inquiries, Shambhu, a week saying, Kabir, can you help me with XYZ? Can you help me with my song? How do I get it out there? Can you reharmonize this track? Like, so am in so many different industries. I think of my newsletter as a way to synthesize and to provide value for people. Excuse me. It's also a way of building attention, of course. So, like, if I want to spotlight a project of mine eventually, I don't have to recreate the audience. And I advise a lot of artists, it's like, if when you're sending out something about your music, that's great, but it's functioning as an advertisement in someone's email box. And so I don't watch the news to watch advertisements. I don't read a magazine to read the advertisements. It's all about creating value. And so I think it's important that if we're in what's called the attention economy, most people are on their phones. How do you capture attention, and how do you pull that into your own ecosystem? And how do you pull that into connecting with an audience? Because it's hard because the feed is so ephemeral. You're in the feed and you're out of the feed. I think the newsletter is really an effective way of having an ongoing conversation. And I'll send out a 7-point Sunday and I'll get dozens of people writing back, asking me follow-up questions. So we kind of work through it. But maybe, I don't run ads in the newsletter. Maybe I should. And it's really a way of sort of highlighting other people in a way. And of course, like every once in a while, I'll talk about one of my projects, what I'm going through. But I also do it to learn, right? So when you are trying to write something that goes out to thousands of people, you want it to be good and you want it to be well researched. So I learn every week, and it forces me to read. Like, reading is the most high leverage activity. If I'm able to kind of talk and listen to Richard Feynman and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all these great readers, all these great writers over the years, and I'm able to share those insights in the newsletter. And the feedback I get is quite wonderful in the sense that people enjoy it, and if they don't, they unsubscribe, which is cool. So it's really just a vessel to communicate and help people on their creative journey, because especially people with portfolio careers, they're like trying to figure out how to do it. And so the first thing I talk about in every newsletter is like, here's an example of someone actually trying to like make the most out of their life exploring the arts, and they also have a day job usually, and we don't have that much time here on earth. And so if this can like be a template of how to do it, that's worth it. Because the number one question I get is like, how do you do all this stuff? And I'm like, well, I could explain it over and over and over again, but I'm trying to be less of like a carnival show and who's this guy? And it'd be like, hey, this is actually how you can make it work for yourself too, of investing in a certain way that creates capital income streams that can like fund your art and get your art out there. Because I think if more people were creative and more people were creating things, it would make the world a better place, because it's less consuming, more producing, and it would get people into this like producer mindset. Oh, let me go like contribute something to the world. Let me, instead of just taking a book out of the library, let me contribute one to human knowledge.
Yeah, I love that newsletter because it's so efficient. It's a fast read, and there's so much new information in it for me. I'm going to put a link in the podcast description to that. And before music, you were an investment banker. You helped place the initial Alibaba public offering. What did you learn from your business life, and how did it affect your creative work?
I learned the language of money. I remember when I was thinking about going to help the artists of Katrina, musicians of Katrina, my godfather, Uncle Andy, Ambassador Young, he said, if you want to help poor people, if you want to help people anywhere, go work in an investment bank. Learn how to make money. Teach that skill. I'm glad I did, because I was working in emerging markets equities group, and I was able to travel the world and like sit in on conversations between CEOs and billion-dollar investors and our equity capital markets group and our investment bankers, and understand how they look at investments and capex decisions and cost cutting and all kinds of things. And it just created a frame for me to understand the world of why do economies move and why don't they. And so being in the room during some of these large IPOs was fascinating to me. I know I didn't want to be there full time. I really enjoyed my time in banking, but my heart wasn't in it, right? And I would come home from work and then I would write music or compose or produce. So ultimately, like, something had to give, and it ultimately did. But I was just actually meeting with a former colleague of mine a few days ago. And we were both like, just like, we're so glad we did that, because it was a really positive experience for us. But you also have to know, like, when is it time to go? And the other thing I would say is the professional etiquette. I tend to work, Shambhu, with like people like you who've had like corporate jobs, and my mixing engineers and recording engineers, the people who like get back to you quickly, or like call you, or respond in a professional manner. I can usually tell the difference between people who have a corporate experience or a day job and the folks who are more just freelance and only been in the artistic world, because you can kind of tell on the professional etiquette, and you cull your orbit over the years of who you want to work with and who's a challenge. I encourage all artists to spend some time in banking or spend some time in the corporate world to get a sense, if you can, of like how to actually move the needle forward on projects.
I agree with you. I mean, I shared that I didn't really want to be in PR as it became more and more intense. I was looking for ways to get out of it, despite making a lot of money. But when I look at my friends that don't have corporate experience, I sit and I go, God, I wish they would have a little more business experience because they seem naive. You were the first guy to suggest that I focus my creative work around acoustic guitar releases because you saw the growth in those types of playlists on streaming services. And then you released your own album of guitar music, Guitar Spring, Music for a New Season. You're a strategic guy. You seem to have a sense of what's around the corner. Are you intuitive, a brilliant analyst who reads data well, or both?
I try to be thoughtful with the music, and ultimately when I make music, it's about the artist has to do what's in their heart. But oftentimes, Shambhu, I find artists are disappointed because they're like, oh, I want people to listen to it. I want to make money with my music. I want to get reviews. Those are all like, in the spiritual world, things we need to probably detach from because it's all immaterial, and it's recognition, which I get. Nietzsche says we are beasts with red cheeks, and recognition is really important for people. I understand that. So if you're making music and you're not making commercial music and you're making art music, how do you build an audience around that? And so it's being thoughtful about which project you take on. I try to think about music, and at least these creative projects, as the way Karl von Clausewitz, the great military general, thinks about warfare. He says, what are the tactics to, win a battle? But grand strategy is which project you do in the first place, which war you fight in the first place. So I often talk with artists on that grand strategy ideas. Okay, what idea do you want to explore in the first place? Because if you're doing, for example, big band music around Duke Ellington, I love Duke Ellington. The thing is, it's only going to reach probably an audience that's into Duke Ellington or into big band music, right? Whereas if you do a project that's around big band music, but looking at the songs of America featuring undocumented young Americans, you're going to reach an audience that may be broader than that. Both routes are okay. You just have to be clear about what you want to do with it. So when I make my guitar music, it doesn't matter to me if people listen to it. That's great. I'm doing it for myself. When I make the meditation music that I make with my mother or something, it doesn't matter to me is because I'm making it just to make it. But I find that so many artists, again, are like, they want to be well known, or they want to just get it out there. And if you're making a certain type of music, non-commercial music, you have to be thoughtful about how do you get it out in the world. And it's not just about renting someone's influence. A label can only do so much. A PR person can only do so much. Many people come with finished projects. I want to get it out there. It's like, well, that's like the ninth inning of a ball game. Project's already done. So much of the project is set up at the very beginning, and you have to think through those things. And so I think that's a function that I try to help artists with, is like, think through, if you proceed with this idea, the trajectory of the project might be limited. If you proceed with this other idea, then the trajectory of the project might be higher or broader. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about just that, of like what project to take on in the first place and how to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, I think a great example of that synergy you create is Fandango at the Wall, which took the music of Arturo O'Farrell and presented it as a way of exploring the U.S.-Mexico relationship through the lens of the Fandango Fronterizo Music Festival at the border wall in Tijuana, San Diego. That became a film that premiered on HBO and HBO Max. So you took this music project, this cultural theme, and just exploded it.
Yeah, I mean, that was a project that took a village and many years of our lives. Arturo came to me with this newspaper article, and it was about Fandango Fronterizo with Jorge Francisco Castillo. They did this intimate concert at the border wall. And so as soon as I saw the article, I was like, this is it. Sometimes you just are like, this is the project. And so, because it had drama and tension, right? It had a story in there. Yeah, you can go play a San Jarocho concert in the middle of Mexico or somewhere in the U.S., but to do it at the border wall when the political climate is tense seemed to me like something that was compelling. And so then I went to San Diego and Tijuana, met Jorge, sort of explained to Jorge our mutual vision of creating a project there. And to his credit, he was like, let's go, let's do it. And so then we brought dozens of artists to the border wall. We put the concert together with like 6 weeks to go or something, and we said we should get a film crew down there. So we found a film crew, and from start of the idea, we really started working on it, I think in 2017, and the film debuted in 2020. So 2.5 years, and the film was premiering on HBO. So it was lightning quick. And we stayed with that project for years. I wrote a book on the topic of U.S.-Mexico relations and explored that relationship over 100 years, and not just the Jim Crow era, the Juan Crow era of all the violence that happened at the U.S.-Mexico border. And that project is very special to us. And the jaraneros, the musicians that are featured in there, these jarocho musicians, my understanding is that they've been able to come to the United States with the recognition they've received and being part of this HBO project. And people either recognize them or they're introduced as part of this project. So in that way, it was great to play a small role in helping these artists tell their stories in the world. And I gotta say, there's something very beautiful about jarocho music. If you go to a Fandango, I never experienced more inclusive music because, in a jam session and in a jazz jam session, you have to know the chord changes to like get up there and play. Even if it's like a 12-bar blues, you have to know where to move your hands. But at Fandango, you can pick up a jarana, which is like a Mexican guitar, a leona, a Mexican bass, and it's just two chords. So most people can move their hands in two different places, right? And so you can have 50 people playing the jarocho, the jarana, and the people are tap dancing in the middle. And so you have 50, 100 people at these festivals, non-musical people joining in. And of course, the more musical people are singing the decimas, the lines and lyrics back and forth. But it's a very inclusive art form where it's like part of life. I went to Veracruz, and we're just sitting there eating and people are performing. It's like breathing, right? And so in that way, there's not really a separation between artist and audience. Like it's all there. It's all very inclusive and amazing to be a part of. And that project's one I'm particularly proud of because it sort of combined everything, and we did it in a way I think that was well, I really enjoyed making that project, right? And seeing how everyone's lives were affected, hopefully for the better.
Yeah, I watched you do it, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So congrats on that. So tell me about your latest release, Stars and Static 2026. It's a lo-fi project, right?
It is a lo-fi project. I'm making lo-fi music because that's where I am creatively. The last few years, Shambhu, have been intense because when you're working with diplomatic projects, humanitarian projects, there's also a pressure to like do justice and represent the artists in a way, but there's also chiefs of staffs and approvals, and so much of it is non-musical. You're just kind of moving through a project from start to completion. And the music's the most fun part about it, but then of course there's all the administrative stuff that goes along with it. So I wanted to make music that was sort of just me, me doing everything. So there's only one person to blame if you don't like it. And Stars and Static is my second lo-fi album. And I've been thinking about America 250 for many years. I tried to think in milestones, and I thought about making like a big band music, but creatively I was like, I'll just make the music myself. And these are songs of America, America the Beautiful, the Stars and Stripes. And what I did is when I travel anywhere, I have a audio recorder with me, and I always will record those sounds. So for example, I did a version of Anchors Aweigh, which is a service song of the United States Navy. And while I was in Naples, I recorded the sounds of the Central Market, right? And so I sampled that into the recording. And then I put a label on it saying these are real field recordings, because I think with all the AI music, I wanted people to know this is a human making all this stuff, and these are real field recordings. And the album begins, Shambhu, with America the Beautiful, but I sampled in the the kids and the sounds of the neighborhood in a park in Atlanta. Because ultimately, what I'm trying to say is, I think what makes America beautiful are the people and our neighborhoods and our families. And the title of the project, Stars and Static, is, a juxtaposition of, yes, aspirational are the stars, but the static is the times we're living in, not just politically, but also like the dislocations from AI and what it means to be human and what it means to be a creator and the economic disparity. So I wanted to create something that was celebratory, but also acknowledge like we're in a very human and raw place. So when you listen to this music, you're going to hear sounds and melodies that you recognize, but they're probably going to be warped out, and they're probably going to be like, wait a second, like, what is he trying to say with this? And it's for you to work out your own interpretation of what it is. And I'm proud of the work because it's something that represents America and my take on America. The great Albert Murray wrote a book called The Omni-Americans. And he would say, the Black American experience is the American experience. The Jewish American experience is the American experience. The Indian American experience is the American experience. And so I feel like this is my commentary on where we are as a country and where I think we maybe want to go.
Beautiful. Any final thoughts for people who want to be more productive in their creative or business lives?
Everyone's different, right? So you have to make time, and I'm wired to create things, right? And so I'm always creating something, and I'm always like reading. So when I'm not, I'm just not around very much. I'm usually reading a book or composing or going on a walk. Those are like my three functions. A lot of people find a lot of utility out of leisure activities. So I don't golf. I don't really ski. So if you want to, it depends which degree you want to do it. But I would say in these days, the tools have become more like democratic than ever with AI and all the music creation tools. The barrier for entry is like actually quite low if you want to be a creator. And I think creation brings happiness because it's the art of creating that provides meaning and joy. And so I encourage people to use some of these tools. Yeah, you can write a poem with AI, but then like use it as a prompt to like refine it and choose your own words and use it as a way to, as a kind of form of co-intelligence to write your own poetry and to do the research. I would say, a lot of people fear AI, and there's reason to, for sure. But I would say use some of these tools as a way to explore things you've never explored before and get over that barrier of, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. I saw how like 900 million, is it monthly users or daily users of ChatGPT? That's crazy. 1 billion daily users of ChatGPT. So a lot of people are using it. So how do you use it in a way that not just for like, social media copy, but to create stuff of real meaning? And I encourage everyone to kind of look at that. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive. It's also like a very challenging time to be alive. And the more we create in the world, I think hopefully more happiness we bring in the world.
Well, my thanks to you, Kabir, for joining me today for this episode of Shambhu Sessions. You can learn more about Kabir and his work at kabir.cc, and I'll add that link to the podcast description. If this episode moved you, please like, follow, and share Shambhu Sessions wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Shambhu, and until next time, stay open, stay inspired, and keep listening.